Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet, and it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and if you choose to do that, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process. And it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. From that page on whyagain.org, you can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. Secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so by giving us a call. You can call through the Needle app. Download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, AI Tuner for Live Radio, from your app store. Once you download it, open it, sign in, answer a few questions, it will give you the option to type a comment in the app or tap the phone icon and actually speak to us live voice to voice. If you are unable to do that or prefer not to, you can send us an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate when people send us emails or call live or add comments, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that's just beyond words easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So today is a Thursday, and that means there will be a support group tonight in 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time, and you're welcome to join us or pass the information along to anybody you think might benefit from joining us All the information to join us for free is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. mindshiftersacademy.org. And there's a separate login page for the Tuesday group and a separate one for the Thursday group. So please feel free to join us and or pass that information along to anybody you think might benefit from joining us. It's a wonderful way to get support for understanding how these tools work and apply them actively in your life to better and better benefit. So we have plenty of time today for comments and questions. Yesterday we were finishing reading the book titled Of Course in Miracles, written by Alan Cohen. And the only thing we didn't read in that book was the epilogue at the end. And I will read that today. But first, I just want to mention that I had a very strong impression as I was doing my morning work this morning, and it just came to me very strongly to talk about something that came up yesterday or the day before on the show, and this is the concept of things like virtual reality headsets. And that then led me to mention the videos by Anil Seth that you can find on YouTube about his research into perception and their conclusions that all of us are hallucinating our perception of the world. And this is shared by a number of researchers. Every one of us is creating whatever sound, whatever sights we see, we're creating them, or at least our experience of them, inside our brains. Michael Ryce likes to say that our brain then paints a picture on the inside of our eyeballs, that the eyes don't see anything in the world outside of us. They are simply antennas that receive impressions from a specific range of the electromagnetic energy system that we call light. And when it is stimulated, the eye then sends electrical chemical signals down the optic nerve to a certain part of the brain, and then the brain creates an image, a picture, an imitation of something from its past, and it shows it to us, and it tells us in its own little way, this is what's happening outside of you. And I remember being a child, and I don't mean a toddler, I mean a young person somewhere in my early double digits, 10, 11, 12 years old. I remember thinking about, how do we know that when I look out and see the color red, that it looks the same way to somebody else? And I remember understanding or coming to the realization that we have no way of knowing that. Even if we can agree on what the color red is, my actual perception in my mind might be the same as what your perception is for yellow, but as long as it never changes, if I always apply that word to that experience, then we're in agreement, because this series of light waves stimulating my eye and then the optic nerve are what I call red. It's what you call red, but perceptually to me, it might look like what the color yellow or black looks like to you. But we would never be able to tell that, because we're always talking about consistency with the word and consistency with the object. Well, the research continues to verify that this process of perception that our culture tends to think of as passive is highly active. And on the CIA website, where they do research on perception, because it's very important that their field representatives have access to the best data for their reports, so they're researching perception and how to understand it and what motivates it and what might change it in one way or another. They're very clear from their research that our process of perception does not record reality, it constructs reality. And that's why each of us can have a dramatically different impression of what had happened at a play or a movie, or when we watch a car accident unfold in front of us, or we are evaluating the results of the latest political race, etc., because we're literally not watching the same thing, because what we're watching gets determined by our brain, and our brains are, as Michael Ryce likes to say, these carbon-based memory devices inside our skull, which operate much like a hard drive on a computer, and all they can do is record what's been inputted to them and then play it back when it's called up. So what I'm looking at, what my brain shows me as pictures, is always based on what I've seen in the past and how I'm making sense of it based on the input in the present moment. But it's never this, what we would refer to as the completely objective truth of life, because all of my experiences from my past color my perception every moment of the day. And so then there was this idea about virtual reality, and I'm pretty sure it came up in the book that we were reading by Alan Cohen, and it just dawned on me this morning on my way, as I was doing my morning routine and driving to work, that it is really, really a bad idea to argue with anybody about anything, because you don't know what their virtual reality headset is showing them about the world. And so this doesn't mean, when I say it's a bad idea to argue with anybody about anything, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea to have discussions and talk about things. It just means that if somebody wants to tell you that what you're looking at isn't what you think it is, or that you're completely wrong for having any particular set of observations, and they get animated about it with intense emotional energy, it doesn't make any sense to argue with them, because they're probably not looking at the same data points that you are. We all think we're looking at the same data points, and yet what gets through my filter, what actually registers in my brain as valid or accurate, can be light years away from what gets into through your senses and into your brain as valid and accurate. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can't, force somebody to have a different perception. So the next set of thoughts for me had to do with dealing with people that occasionally, if you follow psychological literature, or even, the pop psychology people that are out here on social media, they'll have things about how to how to deal with a narcissist. Even things like, what's the best one-line response to a narcissist? And I have, based on several of those I've read and what was coming to me this morning, probably the best thing to do when somebody tries to tell you that your perception is way off, or that, they didn't say what you heard them say, or they never did what you saw them do, or that you never did what they're telling you they did. Well, based on this idea that everybody's living in their own virtual reality that can be dramatically different from yours, whenever that happens, probably the best thing for me to say is, oh, well, that's not the way I see it, period. And don't try to convince them to see it your way. Just let them know, I'm not going to pick up the tug of war rope. I'm not going to fight you on this. I'm just going to let you know that's not my perception. That's not the way I see it. That's not how it looks to me. Or you can say to them, that's an interesting interpretation of the events. Now, for my money, the most important thing about this kind of conversation is that I'm monitoring myself for the earliest warning signs of tightness or tension or negative reaction to something someone says or does, and that I take 100% responsibility for that. Because I'm the one that creates any sense of being offended, any energy or emotional experience of anger or hurt or confusion. I'm the one that creates that inside of me. And to demonstrate that to yourself at different levels, if that hasn't come, full force to you as a full force truth of life yet, you can demonstrate it to yourself. Excuse the pause there. There was a sneeze that had to happen. You can watch how many times you generate upset about things when they're said by one person, and you don't generate upset when the very same thing is stated by another person or in a different context. All right, well, there was a little time to have a sneeze and blow my nose. So if you think about how many times you've gotten upset, or about what, and just pick one of them and ask yourself, has there ever been a time when someone has said or done this very same thing to me or in my presence that I have not chosen this response for it? I've chosen either to chuckle at it, or to just wave it off, or to just overlook it completely, or the example that just flooded into my brain was a story that Jeannie Ryce would tell about how she used to get all kinds of agitated whenever she thought someone was ignoring her or discounting her opinion as a person, as a woman, whatever. And she started doing worksheets on it. She did mind shifters about it. She did extensive work on it. And then one day she was in a group setting, and when they took a break in the group, a young woman came up to her and said, in a very agitated, emotionally agitated state, she said, "I can't believe it. Did you see what that guy did to you?" And Jeannie said, "What are you talking about?" She hadn't noticed anything. And the young woman said, "Well, this guy in the group asked you a question, and then just as you started to answer, he turned and started chatting with somebody else. It was the most disrespectful thing I've ever witnessed. I can't believe it." And this young woman went on and on with her agitation. And Jeannie Ryce, who had had a history of getting triggered to upset whenever her mind told her that she was being ignored, she had not even noticed that this happened. So she had done so much work on it that now Jeannie's interpretation of that was completely different, and so she didn't generate upset at all, and her mind didn't tell her that the upset was being caused by someone outside of her. And then Jeannie was able to coach this young woman about the very same thing, because here, this event, as it was being recorded in this young woman's mind, didn't even involve the young woman, and yet she was generating lots of emotional upset and listening to her mind tell her that the upset was about how somebody disrespected Jeannie Ryce. When in truth, the upset had nothing to do with anybody outside of that young woman. And she was playing out a pattern. She was, throwing an interpretation on this set of experiences that her mind was creating for her, and she was creating offense. She was taking offense, and her mind was telling her that she was offended by what this person did. When in reality, I'm never offended by anything outside of me. I only generate offense or being offended based on the interpretation I choose and place on these neural firings and interpretations of the impressions that my mind is getting from my five senses. That's the only thing that ever creates upset in me. Nothing else ever has, and nothing else ever will. So if you're able to recognize that none of us are really looking at the same thing, the way our culture, our families, our language would teach us, and that each of us is quite actually wearing a type of virtual reality headset, which can be, receiving and interpreting life events and the signals from our senses dramatically differently than people standing right next to us, then it's a far easier thing to do to tap into the value behind one of my statements I created years ago. It was, please don't take offense even if it's offered. Now, what does that mean? It means someone can come up and offer me a compliment and I can take offense, but I don't have to. Someone can come up and offer me an insult and I can take offense, but I don't have to. Now, how can I sidestep taking offense if somebody comes up to me with the intention of getting me angry or insulting me, and they say or do something that most everybody in the culture I was raised in would say that's disrespectful or insulting? How can I sidestep creating offense and generating negative emotions within me? Well, the beginning of it for me, the way I've learned to do that most of the times these days, on my good days, is that I recognize and I remind myself almost daily at this stage in my career and my life that whatever comes out of a person's mouth is only, always, and forever going to tell me about what's going on inside that person. It can't possibly tell me about what's going on in the world around that person, or in and for me or anybody else that's there. And then the next thing I remind myself on a regular basis is, if there's ever any kind of anger, irritation, insult, negativity coming out of a person, the only thing that tells me is that there's some kind of pain, fear, or sadness going on inside that person that they either are unwilling or feel incapable of dealing with internally. And that's why it's coming out being directed towards someone else. So if I'm aware of these, if I'm actively making these observations and I'm having a good day, and at this stage in my career, having practiced these tools for well over 20 years now, and other tools before that that were similar for 10 or 15 years. So my practiced ability at this has helped me get better and better at it. So on my good days in the past, I've had people that I love and care about come at me angry and yelling and name calling and swearing, and my response has been one of compassion, because my mind knows that if somebody comes at me with anger or insult or swear words coming out of them, what it means is they have pain, fear, or sadness in them. And if it's someone that I care about, it's a friend or a lover or a family member, and I recognize, oh, this person's in pain or fear or sadness and feels really stuck and helpless, then there's nothing for me to get defensive about. There's nothing for me to run away from or attack back to. So our ability to interpret things that are neutral as negative or positive, our ability to interpret things even that are negative, like an insult thrown at us or a swear word, as something that's simply an indicator that someone we care about is in pain, and then use it to generate compassion, that ability lies within each of us. It may not have been awakened, it may not be well developed and practiced, and yet the capacity is there. And the flip side of it is also true, that someone can say something that's intended to be positive or intended to be informational and completely neutral, and I can throw an interpretation on it that is negative, and in response to my interpretation, generate negative emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, sadness. And when you start to just observe that directly in your own life, if you're committed to observing it directly in your own life, it can become a game changer for you. One of the most recent examples in my own life was that I had sent a friend a link to the most recent podcast I had done with Dr. Robert Smith. And one of the people that I've known ever since my college years, which is, pushing 50 years now, or a little over 50 years, depending upon how you mark that. She sent me back an email after having listened to this with 9 or 10 paragraphs of very thoughtful analysis and useful links to further research. And when I first got it, my response was to feel like I'd been punched in the gut. And yet, the more I read what she wrote, there was nothing negative in it. There was an expression of a wish for something more, but there was nothing that was naysaying directly or saying this is garbage, why did you send this to me, or I thought you were a better interviewer. There was nothing like that involved in her response. And yet my primary experience was to react as though I'd basically been. So in the context of this work, there's a whole series of worksheets for me to do. And as I do them, and then I go back and read the email, I'm amazed that I took anything negative from it. And if I can do that, create a negative response to a neutral email and even a pleasantly positive email from a friend, then if I can undo that with a round or two of tapping and a few simple reality management worksheets, then I can do that with even if somebody comes at me intending to offend me. I don't have to take offense, even if it's offered. So, we have plenty of time for comments and questions. We've got about a half an hour left. And appreciate you all for listening. If you're listening on Needle, live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio. We're glad you're here, but from that position, you can't type a comment in the app or raise a hand to talk to us. If you'd like to do that, you can download the Needle app from your app store. It's NEDL, Needle AI Tuner for Live Radio. And once you download the app, open it and sign in, answer a few questions, you'll have the capacity to either comment. And we greatly appreciate when anybody does that. So let us know how this is landing for you. In lieu of anybody doing that, I'm going to read the epilogue from Alan Cohen's book that we finished reading yesterday. The epilogue says, we can all use a miracle. You might yearn to receive an answer to a prayer, heal from a disease, resolve a painful relationship, or find money to pay your bills. Or you might long to reignite your waning passion for, or find the right place in the great scheme of all things. From where you're standing, you don't see how that could happen. You may have tried and tried, prayed and prayed, practiced and practiced, and yet still not seen a result. You believe it would take an act of divine intervention for your prayer to be answered. I'm here to tell you that such divine intervention is absolutely available. You are not lost. You are not abandoned. You are not outside love's embrace. Your prayer will be answered with a miracle, a shift in perception from fear to love, often followed with a material manifestation. Your vision will be cleansed. You will find the pathway home, and you will walk it. While you are seeking a physical result, you're secretly being trained in spiritual awakening. The Creator does not want you to experience a miracle and then go back to a life that's devoid of true joy. The Creator wants miracles to become a way of life for you. And then, instead of going from one grueling task to another, your days will become a string of blessings, each one outdoing the last one. If this vision seems outlandish to you, you can see how far you've drifted from your natural state of knowing your deep worthiness. Yet, despair not, there is always a turning point. In the story The Prodigal Son, he realizes that eating the pig's slop is not what he was born to live. He turns about and sets foot on the path toward his father's home that he left in haste. Now he wants the safety and security of his homeland more than the glitter that the faraway country dangled in front of him. If you've completed reading A Course in Miracles, you're on the homecoming trajectory. And if I said A Course in Miracles, I misspoke. He's talking about the book that he's just read the epilogue for here. If you've completed reading this book of Course in Miracles, you are on the homecoming trajectory. You've made a choice for healing. You are headed in the right direction. You now have the wisdom, the tools, and the vision to cross the finish line. As the book A Course in Miracles tells us many times, you do not walk alone. Legions of unseen helpers are cheering for you and championing your cause. Take hope and take faith. You are more deeply loved than you have ever imagined. Those who have walked by your side will stay with you. The hand of grace that has taken you this far will not stop now. Even while your ship cuts through the sea in the dark of night, you can see the lights of the city of refuge on the shore. You will reach safe harbor and once again walk on solid ground. The Creator keeps its promises. As a Creator's offspring, you will keep yours. Only the veils of illusion make it seem as if the vows of spirit can be broken. I don't simply wish you miracles. I actually see them for you. I know your divine right to them. The time will come when we look back on our earthly journey, have a good laugh, and wonder, what was I thinking? But for now, we need to think anew. We can use the mind that the Creator gave us to empower ourselves and each other. When we do that, miracles will fill our days as fully as hardship once did. If you can believe even for a moment that you deserve all the gifts that your heart desires, then you open the door for them. The treasure house you find them in will be far more vast than any treasure troves you sought on earth. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. We walk hand in hand to the mountaintop, none left behind. Once there, we will plant the flag of victory and claim earth in the name of heaven. So that is the epilogue to the book of Course in Miracles by Alan Cohen. And as usually happens when we reach the end of a reading like this or a sharing of a book with commentary, I throw it open and ask for comments and questions and or suggestions about where to go next. We have what I would consider the blessing of this time together on this internet show to explore things we haven't explored before. We have the blessing that we can use to go back and review things we've already done. Go in a completely different direction. Spend the next few hours together doing worksheets on different things. Let us know what you believe would be most useful for you. I was just trying to turn on the microphone for Julia, and apparently in the process, the call dropped. Now attempting to turn on the microphone for Susan Bingham.
Hi, Dr. Tim.
Welcome.
Uh, I I was thinking about the fact that you're going to be interviewing Christian Sundberg, and I know it's way far in advance, and I know we've been, I think, twice through his book. I
No,
took a
not
what?
twice. No.
Not twice?
Yeah, and not the whole thing, but big chunks of it
Yeah.
thoroughly, yes.
Well, I at some point I would love to put together questions not only on my own, but maybe all of us compile our questions for him, and maybe another reading of his book would be great. I took out his book weeks ago when you were reading again or talking about him, and I got bogged down because he has a kind of a strange, um, to me, not very friendly way of getting through material with lots of reference numbers and jumping back and forth. And I abandoned it for something else. And I could go back again and do a more focused job on that. But that's one thing I'm going to do anyway when his um, that interview is going to take place. But that's one thought, is to circle back to him. I'm particularly interested now because of the state of what this country is going through, and I'm I'm encouraged a little bit in the last couple of days with the amount of pushback for some things that are seem pretty obviously hurtful to people who are already in, struggling with making enough money, finding places to live, mental health problems. Um, and I'm wondering whether he looks upon this time as the darkness before the dawn type of time, crisis before the light shows up. People have been saying this for years, but on the other hand, it appears to me, and it might be just by perception, that things are more intensely, urgently in need of correction than ever before. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's how I see it. So,
Well, what I would share with you about that is that I frequently hear that from people and have been hearing that from people for decades.
yeah, right.
So, you know, which decade were they right about, right? Which is the worst of times and best of times? So, I would encourage you to just apply pretty much everything we've talked about on the show so far today, the idea that you're creating this perception
Hmm.
and then choosing to create it differently. So, you know, the idea is you can create a perception and then from it generate fear,
Yeah.
or you can create a perception and from it generate hope, joy, uh, aliveness, creative opportunity.
Hmm.
Reminds me of how people talk about in every time of economic downturn, somebody's finding a way to make money on it.
Yeah.
And so, there are people who say, "Oh my gosh, I can't even get a job because the economy's so bad." And in that same time and moment in the economy, other people are saying, "This is a great time to start this business
Hmm.
because people desperately need this because the economy's collapsed in this way or that way."
Right. I can see that happening right in my own family, right with the people who are living with us and in my own family. Even my son is starting to talk about getting excited about doing this, that, or the other because it's needed and the need is very intense right now. So I know just what you're talking about. I feel as if I've got one foot in the fear trough and one foot's coming out and getting hopeful. So,
Well, and the key to the fundamental message of this work, everything we do on the Mind Shifters Radio and in the support groups, is the recognition that if I'm generating fear, I'm not seeing things clearly.
I'm having to breathe on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Do. take a breath or two, and maybe that's just complete nonsense, and maybe there's something useful in it for you.
Yeah.
Right? The idea is I might actually be looking at the capital T truth of what's happening, and yet my interpretation of what it means and what I can or can't do about it might be completely off because it's colored by the traumas of my past, or it's colored by the programmed belief systems that I was indoctrinated with in my family of origin. And so, I'm not telling you, hey, there is no X, Y, or Z person in the White House right now using the presidential authorities differently than we've ever seen. I'm not telling you that's not happening.
Yeah.
In this process, all we're saying is that's not causing fear.
Right.
What you're trying to impose on that in terms of a way of interpretation and meaning, that's what you're using to generate your fear. And as soon as fear gets generated in the human mind, perception is distorted powerfully.
Totally.
Our science tells us that. The Course in Miracles says, you must come to understand the distorting power of the way you want things to be. Well, whenever we're generating fear, we desperately want things to be different than they are. In one way or another, or in many ways. And so this is not what we're taught by most of our teachings in this culture and in our families, and certainly it isn't even what I was taught in my graduate school training to get a doctorate in clinical psychology. But the fact of the matter is, when I'm in a state of fear, when I'm experiencing the state of emotion we call fear, I'm not in my right mind, so to speak.
Yeah, and your talk with Dr. Robert Smith the other day, he said the mind and the body are connected. One influences the other. They're really, they're not separable. And I'm thinking as you're talking, I got a good night's sleep last night, and I have more vitality, I think, because of that. So certain things that were scary yesterday seem like opportunities today. I mean, it's all one thing keys off another, and you have to be very careful about every little thing that you do with yourself, taking care of yourself in order to be well enough to make the most of the challenges.
Yes, or to be in a position where you've got enough, let's call it discretionary energy,
Yeah, that's a
so
good
that
word.
it's not stuff that you need just to survive, but it's energy you can use to pursue a hobby, or start a new political action committee or whatever. And if you're run down and you're not eating right and you're not sleeping right and you're draining your mental emotional energy by pouring your mind energy into thoughts that generate anger and overwhelm, then you don't have that discretionary energy
Right.
to use creatively for what you might consider to be the good.
There's a very interesting phenomenon in our household going on right now because our little family are Islamic, and they practice Ramadan. They have been fasting, but the mother is teaching all day. Then she goes and works a night shift at Amazon when she can. She is also taking a course so that she can become a court interpreter, and because she's fluent in 2 languages, at least 3 languages. She's working very hard. When she comes home, because she has 2 sons, she feels responsible for making sure they have enough food. So even though they can't eat all day, she's cooking. And when it gets dark, she calls them from the nether regions of the house, whatever, and feeds them. And last night she said, I'm going to break this fast. I can't do it. When people fast, they really need to be quiet. This is a devotional thing, and I am doing too much, and I've been feeling lightheaded. My blood pressure is crazy. I'm thirsty and dehydrated, and I can't do it. And she was talking to me about how would God be mad? And we had this great discussion about how God wants her to eat right now if she's working that hard, and God's very sorry that she has to work that hard. Of course, this is just my interpretation of it, but we're having, and one of her boys has stopped fasting because it's making him feel sick at school. And whatever it, she feels terrible because she's not maintaining her tradition. But she's got even the cultural challenge of having two old people living in the house with her who are eating when they feel like it. And we try not to eat in front of them, but you know, the house isn't very big. So, and we share the kitchen. So we're talking again about perception of things, vitality, what things mean. It's just I'm mixing it all up and I'm adding a sort of loop to what you're talking about. But I just wanted to bring that in because it's been so interesting.
All right. Well, let's see if we can't welcome Julia into the conversation. Julia,
Okay.
are you able to connect this time? Julia, if you're speaking, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you. Can you hear her, Susan?
No.
No?
There she is.
There she is.
Oh, cool. Well, that was really good that I didn't get on the phone and Susan got on the phone because I'm on my way to work and I stopped to use the restroom and get a coffee and I'm like, oh, where's my purse? So if I would have been talking, I couldn't have handled my crisis because I'm on my way to work, but I have to take a ferry boat and I need my ferry ticket. And so instead of panicking, I was like, okay, there's a solution, calm down. And then my brain said, call your daughter, tell her to go home and take a picture of your ferry ticket. And then I can show it to the booth and they'll let me on the boat. So, because it's like an hour drive. I just drove an hour to get
Oh
to
my
the
God.
ferry. And I'm like, ow, I don't have my purse. But crisis avoided. I'm driving. I'm going to get on the boat and I'm going to go to work. Woohoo!
All
So
right.
thank you, Susan, and how the universe conspired that for me. Thank you.
Good work,
Yeah,
Julia.
yeah. So, well, I didn't do anything. So
You got creative.
I'm just here. Listening. And so, yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about some thoughts that came through my mind with the epilogue and what you said this morning about we're hallucinating. And because on my way, before I listened to you, I listened to this YouTube Nisargadatta, and it was like this I am meditation. And he's just saying, like, just disidentify from everything and disidentify from yourself and disidentify from the world and just be in the I am presence. And so then I'm listening to you talk about the hallucination. We're hallucinating all this, and I kind of understand that, like, we have these plastic brains, and so whatever we're told, it creates our reality, and whatever we're thinking creates our reality. And then the book and the epilogue, and
Are you there? Susan, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Did she
Yeah.
drop off for you as well?
Yeah. She said epilogue and that was
Yeah,
the end.
yeah, that's what I heard too. Give it a moment to see if Julia
Maybe she
comes
went
back
under
on.
a bridge.
Hello?
Julia, are you there?
Oh,
There
Yes.
she
I'm
is.
still there. My daughter went away. I'll just, oh, I can't even, I'm saying so much and I'm so sorry because we're almost out of time, but I'll try to make this in a short synopsis.
You said the epilogue, and what was in the epilogue that was stirring for you? He was talking about the idea that miracles are there for us and we can welcome them if we remember our true value. But if we're stuck believing that we have no value or that we're damaged or broken, then we shut off the possibility of even experiencing the miracles that come. All right. Well, I'm not hearing Julia.
No, I'm not either.
Okay. Well, we're down to our last few minutes, so I will thank you for the call, and I will end this. Thank you, Susan, as always, for your calls and comments. I will remind us all that there's a support group available this evening from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. All the information you would need to join us is available on the MindShiftersAcademy.org website. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Michael and Jeannie hopefully will start a live hour after this. And I'll remind us that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.